What's good, YouTube? Warstorm here, coming at you guys with another video. Today I'll be updating a deck that's kind of been due for a new update, which is Dark Magicians. Dark Magicians have kind of always been one of my favorite, more rogue-style decks. I mean, it has some nice niche plays with rank 7s with things like Cosmo Brain and Tomahawk, and overall, I just like the idea of having a stun deck that can somewhat combo. Now, it is a very reactive deck by nature, and unfortunately, stun is the best way to play the deck in its current form. But that's not necessarily a bad thing when we have cards like Gozen Match that are as powerful as they are, and the deck's ability to, remove things from the board with Dark Magical Circle is pretty darn nice. And there are some pretty nice rank 7 plays, I think, that a lot of people tend to overlook when they build the deck. So much like the last profile I did, we're going to talk about the meta matchups, then go into the deck profile. So the first match I'm talking about is Thunder Dragons. Thunder Dragons it's a very coin flip matchup. It's definitely unfavorable if they set up, but if you do set up the full Tomahawk into Topologic Bomber Cerberus combo with a chainable Regeki, a well-timed Bomber Dragon nuke, typically used on the effect of a Dragonhawk to summon one out of the grave, can be enough to seal the deal for you. And of course, Gozen Match is a very strong card against the deck because the majority of the time their attributes are all over the place, so it can really put the sting on them. But that being said, Titan, and if they get set up, Titan is a very real threat to the deck, being able to pop cards like Circle before they can resolve, and you don't necessarily always have ways to chain to the effect before Titan. But overall, I feel like it's a bit unfavorable, not unwinnable in some cases, and it's very, very reliant on you winning the die roll and you having the proper setup to prevent them from making their fusions. Overall, it's probably definitely unfavorable but not unwinnable matchup. Then as far as Dark Link, this is a very difficult matchup, no doubt about it, for Dark Magician against this deck. Rongo doesn't hurt you as much as you think it would because you can tend to float through your back row and use things to kind of much like Sky Striker currently does. However, Gumblar is just a bit too much for the deck to deal with, in my opinion, and you can go first and disrupt them with the typical Cerberus and Bomber Dragon combo that the deck sets up with Cosmo Brain, but it's just the fact that they have so many combo cards that one board nuke is not going to get the job done in most cases. So it's definitely an unfavorable matchup, but it's something, and it's also, again, die roll based because Dark Magician isn't going first deck. Sky Striker, definitely not totally unfavorable with this matchup, but Widow Anchor actually doesn't do anything to Dark Magician because Dark Magician's a vanilla monster, so it can't be negated by Anchor and taken with Anchor. So that's definitely a plus for you against Sky Striker, is that your main playmaker, Dark Magician, is unaffected by Widow Anchor. So that's definitely a good thing for the deck. I also think that the deck's greatest weapon, but there's things like Afterburners, Jamming Waves that will remove your Eternal Soul from the board, and unless you have something like Bomber Dragon plus Cerberus set up, your board's going to get nuked. So that being said, I think instead of setting up the normal combo, you can always make Trisbana, which does force Sky Striker to get rid of it before they make a play. So that's not the worst thing in the world, I think. And it's definitely not an unwinnable matchup, much like with Thunder Dragons, but it's most likely unfavorable. Altergeist, however, is actually not a difficult matchup, I think, for the deck. Rivalry of the Warlords barely touches your deck, and things like Secret Village also don't touch your deck because your deck's entirely Spellcaster, so it's definitely not. Most of the cards they do play don't hurt your deck that much. And the other thing is that Altergeist has a hard time dealing with recurrable monsters over, let's say 1700, because that's how big Marionetter is. So that's one thing I find. As long as you can protect Eternal Soul and keep it up and banishing their resources, it can be very difficult for them to play against you. Now, that being said, Altergeist can bounce your Eternal Soul with Silkidus and nuke your board, so that's something you have to think about. But overall, I would say Altergeist is a very, very winnable matchup for Dark Magician. So with all the way, we'll go ahead and get the deck profile. Now, I won't spend too much time on the basic stuff. I think all of you know by now. 3 Dark Magician, standard. 3 Raj, your primary searcher, you play 3. 3 Apprentice, you'll notice that Magician of Dark Illusion, a.k.a. Mahdi, is not here. It's just not a good card. I know that a lot of people tend to play this card But when I thought about it, if you're not playing something like Allure, there's literally no reason to play Magician of Dark Illusion in your deck. So, and if you're using it for a navigate target, you're not bringing out Apprentice, which defeats the purpose of the card. It's also a brick in the hand because it doesn't do anything until your opponent, if you activate a spell and trap on your opponent's turn. So it's definitely not my favorite card. I think Cosmo Brain does what this thing does better. It's not really been good since Apprentice Illusion Magician came out. As far as the other card monsters, the monster lineup, Blue Boy is just, it's nice to have a normal summon that gets your whole spellbook engine going. Yeah, it sucks that it kind of conflicts with Rod at times, but in a pinch, you can actually discard Blue Boy for cost of knowledge, which is really good. So I still kind of like the Blue Boy in here, but if you don't, you can swap the Blue Boy out for Third Secrets or an Upstart Goblin, whatever your preference happens to be. Now, as far as one of the main new playmakers for the deck, it's Cosmo Brain. This card gives the deck an actual feasible win condition. So if you're unfamiliar with Cosmo Brain, it's a very simple card. It has to be first special summoned by sending a non-effect monster from your hand or field to the grave. So you do have to have these two cards in your hand to summon Cosmo Brain to the board, and it gains attack equal to that monster. But the main thing you care about is contribute one effect monster, special summon a normal monster from your hand or deck. So if you open Apprentice plus this, you have full combo, and you can make Tomahawk, which leads to Link shenanigans. And it actually gives Dark Magician a board it can make going first, because in the days before this card existed, Mahdi into Tomahawk turn 3 is not very good. People aren't going to leave your Mahdi on the board in most cases. So being able to do something turn 1 is really, really big for Dark Magicians. That's why I really think this card is something for the deck to build around. As far as the hand trap lineup, Ash and Ghost Bell are the best hand traps in the format right now. Ash Blossom does not really have a valid replacement. Ghost Bell, you can probably replace it with DD Crow or Skullmeister. I think DD Crow in particular is a little bit better. But Ghost Bell is still a fantastic card, especially in this format where you have things like Thunder Dragons, where it hits. Dragonhawk is really big, being able to hit that and get it out of the way. And it's just all around one of the better hand traps in the format. As far as other monsters, if you don't have the Ghost Bells or Ash Blossoms, there's Effect Failers you can play in the main deck. And maybe DD Crow instead of Ghost Bell. It's really up to you. I think this monster lineup's about perfect. There's not a whole lot I would change about it. As far as the spell lineup, I think it's pretty standard. Pot of Desires is great in the deck. Any deck that plays a lot of trap cards that likes Pot of Desires, because most of the time, especially in a deck like Dark Magician, you're playing extra copies of trap cards you only really need one of. For example, you only need one Navigate and one Eternal Soul typically per game, so banishing extra copies of that off of Desires is really, really good. That's one of the reasons why I like it in a deck like this. And the Spellbook package, I just couldn't find room for the Third Secrets. I really like having 3 Spellbook of Secrets, because if you have multiples in hand, Knowledge can discard the secrets from your hand instead of sending a monster, which can be relevant in some situations. So if you don't think you need the Blue Boy, Secrets can definitely go to 3 if you prefer it that way. As far as the trap lineup, I think it's pretty self-explanatory. Navigation and Eternal Soul are some of the most important cards in the deck. Skill Drain and Imperial Order are win buttons again in the correct matchups. Order is just dumb. It shouldn't be legal, to be honest, and against Sky Striker. Skill Drain is still ridiculous against decks that need their monster effect. Decks like Dark Link really can't play with Skill Drain up. It's just they're just ridiculously powerful one-ofs that that can be auto wins in the correct matchup. So I definitely like having them in the main deck. You might say, well, Aura, you're playing a deck that is pretty high on spells with Order. Well, I prefer Order over Secret Village because it's not outed by Clara and Ruska, the Link 1. That I think it's like summon main phase 2 using a normal summoner set monster. So an Order is a one-of, so it can be a little bit more relevant in that situation. As far as goes in match, as I mentioned earlier, this is one of the most powerful floodgates you can be playing in your deck right now. Every meta deck is hit by this card in some form or fashion and cannot play the game while this is up. The exception possibly being Dark Link, because they can still do a lot of their Phantom Knight combos, but they're not going to be able to extend into the crazy, crazy combos. It also doesn't help much against decks that are the Dark Links if they're playing danger monsters in their deck. So you do have to think about that, but it just, on top of that, you can use it going second even to flip it to make somewhat of a board. then flip it and force your opponent to, remove it can out entire extra links on its own. It's just really, really good card, and I think if you don't like the Gozens, you can also play Solemn Strike in this place of this card, but I just think Gozen Match is in a really good spot this format. As far as the extra deck, Naruto and Ebon are pretty good in the deck. Ebon can be made under Gozen Match, so that's the main reason it's here, but also offers some free removal. Naruto is just a monster negate you can make that can then go into Ebon if you happen to have double Apprentice on the board. It's there. However, the main playmaker of your deck is Tomahawk. If you do resolve a Tomahawk effect for 5 tokens, that usually ends on a board of Topologic Bomber Dragon linked to a Nightmare Cerberus, which is great because Cerberus protects both monsters, all co-linked monsters, from destruction. That also includes the effect of Eternal Soul, and having a board that cannot be outed, cannot be lose to Soul being nuked, is really big for this deck. It's a pretty game-changing combo in my opinion. Now, don't get me wrong, it's nothing spectacular. It's not the crazy board some of the top-tier decks will make, but it's still pretty, for a deck like Dark Magician, it's still a pretty decent enough combo. As far as other things you can do, Griffin can be pretty powerful against certain decks that need their monster effects to function. If it's in the main monster zone, you can link it to things like Phoenix or Ib, for example, to keep it protected. It's a pretty good card. It also has some niches, being able to, if you discard a trap card with Apprentice, you can then reset it with Griffin's effect. That's the main thing I tend to use Nightmare Griffin for when I do play it in some of my decks, is for the reset effect. But the Floodgate effect would probably be more relevant in a different format. As far as the rest of the extra deck, everything is pretty self-explanatory. The Link Spider and the Genius are there for the Tomahawk combos. Sword and Borreload are pretty standard. I don't really think there's too much. And Wee Witch Apprentice is just kind of here. I think I would replace this with the Spellbook link when that comes out in April. So it's really up to you what you prefer. So anyway, guys, it about comes to the end of the deck profile. Let me know what you guys think of Dark Magician. Do you think this deck profile is good? Are there anything you would change? Let me know down in the comment section below. And as always, I thank you guys for watching. Soarstorm, signing out.